This video is the first in a series of 7 on the topic of esoteric leadership. Now, there are so many books written on leadership and so much information online. Why is this different? And I think the word esoteric is the clue. There's a hidden aspect to leadership which is not intuitively obvious. And many of the guidance books written on leadership fail to embrace all of the issues that come up for want of an underlying, overarching sense of integrity. Oneness, as we know from our study of the prism, can be divided into 7, the 7 colours, and everything I do is based on that wisdom which is taught in Sufism, that there exists 7 fundamental energies. They're all different from each other, fundamentally different as red is from green and green is from purple. You know, they're very different from one another. So this course is structured on the idea that we have 7 things to learn. Now, you don't have to learn them sequentially, but it makes a lot of sense to define them separately. It seems to hang together well, and that's how this course is going to be set up. If you stay with it, if you study it rather than just watch it, and you stay with all 7 rather than just dipping in, then there's a lot here for you, I would hope. I've had experience of leadership myself since I was a boy. I never thought of it in that way, but I found myself to be in charge of the group of boys in the Boy Scouts, and then I was the swimming captain and the rugby captain, and I set my own business up, and later I became a management consultant, leading many companies into decision making, and I've set up projects. I've set up a spiritual centre in the Baltic states, and now the Sabian mysteries, and so on. I've just always fallen into leadership roles without really ever thinking that I was particularly good as a leader, and it's kind of a natural thing. I'm not sure if all leaders have to be natural leaders. I don't think that's fair. But I do think that there are qualities that really are necessary conditions for leadership, and probably sufficient when you take them all together. And I've come up with a way of remembering them, using the mnemonics associated with the word L, for example, leadership itself. It tends to underline the purpose of loner quality. You know, one is a loner as a leader. I know there are many ways nowadays of attending to the leadership role as a person, and some of them are definitely more circle-based than hierarchical. However, at any particular moment, if there is a single leader, then that person is alone. You have to be a bit of a loner to do this fully. And you have to have certain qualities, 3 C's and 3 E's I've got. Confidence comes to mind. You have to be creative as well, and you have to express some form of charismatic personality. So those are the 3 C's: confidence, charisma, and creativity. And the 3 E's I've got: energetic, enthusiastic, and engaged. It takes work to be a leader. Energetic is required. You have to do things and not get tired by that. Enthusiasm is like a mood of passion that expresses itself in a way where people can catch it. It spreads. Your enthusiasm is what enthuses people to a higher level of endeavour. And the engagement, you have to be involved fully, committedly, passionately yourself. And there we have the sort of sense of a leader as being a loner, confident, creative, charismatic, energetic, enthusiastic, and engaged. And you could find all manner of different words to express the same thing. But this gives you a sense of the personality qualities and the ability you have to focus and involve yourself within what you're doing. Without that, forget about it. Nobody's going to follow you if you're not going anywhere. So I'm going to distinguish the 7 different aspects of leadership using what began with the 7 planes of consciousness in Sufism. And this is what makes it esoteric, is because there are these 7 energies, and they're something that we can identify much more readily if we bring their concepts, also the somatic experience, down to earth. And so what I've done is created 7 very simple words to represent or symbolize or even name these worlds that are studied in Sufism. And the first one is know. And we look here at the keywords for know, and we find that boundaries, identity, choice, and truth help us understand the first aspect of leadership. Now I'm calling that scoping to begin with. When you're leading, you have to know the extent and limit of your field of endeavor, your field of engagement. What are you leading? Who are you leading? How are you leading? Why are you leading? Those kind of things we'll deal with later. But what is the scope? Putting a ring fence around that which you are responsible for and that which is not your concern. This seems so straightforward. Like I mentioned, I was a swimming captain for the school once. My terms of reference were basically that those people who wanted to swim for the school would be my involvement group. If they didn't, I had no interest in them in this context. So it was very clear. I had this job, those duties. It was scoped. But in other circumstances, especially socially, for example, it isn't scoped at all. And there are very foggy lines. And that is not going to work. If you're not clear about what you're leading, then you're not leading it. Before you begin anything properly, you can speculate, you can talk about it, talk it up before you actually decide to lead it. But as soon as you've made that decision, you need to say exactly what it is that you're doing and write it down. There's a difference between thinking it vaguely, thinking it specifically, and writing it down specifically. Because until you write it down specifically, you're not thinking it specifically. It's when you write something down and refine what you've written down so you get exactly the right words to describe exactly what your commitment is, then you know what you're doing. And everyone else does as well. It forms as a kind of a contract of sorts. In company law, they require companies to set up memorandum, an article of association, which defines what the company's for. It is the scoping document of the company. And if you're a project manager, you'd want somebody to give you a written instruction. This is my area of concern, and in that case, this is the purpose. This is the end result that I want. So the second thing I will mention is the purpose and effect of a claim. If you're a leader, you need to claim. If somebody gives you the job as a leader, then who are you responsible to? You're responsible to the person who gives you the job. So the scope you have is defined by them. But if you're a self-empowered leader, then you have to define your own scope. And even if you're given the job by a higher authority, you still won't be able to do the job of leader unless you make a claim. Now, the purpose of making a claim is twofold, I would say, one of which is quite surprising. The purpose of making a claim is to find out who else is making a similar claim. If you're claiming land and someone else is claiming the same land, then there's conflict around that. This is something in the news at the moment. Russia is claiming a certain aspect of land which Ukraine also claims. And so there's a tussle about that. And until that tussle is sorted out, then no leadership can exist in the region. And I've chosen that rather poignant example in order to bring home what happens if you don't resolve these claims at the beginning. They won't go away. So when you're in the middle of a project and you've invested resources and all manner of other things, and then the claim is disputed, you've got more to lose. So much more. You don't want claim disputes later. Not if you can avoid them. And this is what we try and do first of all. We make a claim to see who actually says, no, I'm not letting you have that. I claim it. And you go through that tussle, which could be a gentle negotiation. It could be a compromise, but whatever. You need to actually find that what you're claiming is undisputed, as far as you can tell. The other part of making a claim is clarifying your own commitment to what it is you're doing. And it's not only the claim for an area of involvement, it's the claim that you have the power, the right, the vision, the clarity to be the leader. That's what you're claiming, isn't it? I claim that I can do this. With your help, with other resources, of course, but I'm making the claim that I'm the leader. Now, I do understand how unpopular that is in certain fields of the society, particularly, like, shall we say, the alternative community, the New Age, where that kind of attitude is much disliked, which is kind of why they never get anything worked out, because they don't actually get things done very, very well if they don't make that claim. If you want something to work, to happen, to be sustainable in the long term, to be not brought down by attackers later, then you need to make this claim early. And you say, I want this to happen. Now, if the leadership is a group of people, then the group of people need to say that, okay? But within the group, there will be times when the final decision needs to be made by an individual. That individual can change from time to time in certain groups. Holacracy is the name of one such philosophy where you can share leadership. Situational leadership is another one. There are plenty of examples where you can pass the leadership baton to someone else. Fine. But in the time that you are the leader, then you need to make your claim. And the third thing that I wanted to say was authenticity. If you're overstretching, if you'd like to be a leader but you just haven't got it worked out yet, the best thing is to do is to ask the people to help you to do that, not to pretend that you can do it if you don't know, because then you will get them to expect of you something which you cannot deliver, and that will bring disappointment. We do have to avoid disappointment pretty much at all costs. Disappointment is very undermining of any outcome. So it is unreasonable to think that you're without fault. or without the need for further guidance or help or support. It's absurd to suggest that. And yet the attitude of many leaders is just that. I know what I'm doing. I can get it right. You're less than me, and so on. It's just silly. It's ineffectual. So let it be known that the claim that you make is subject to these imperfections, shall we say, or these needs that you have. Make yourself a little bit vulnerable, and that will win a level of support from the people that you're following, the people who are following you, that you wouldn't otherwise get. A leader must have followers. That's what makes them a leader. And the followers are also in the role of being supportive of the leader and, shall we say, led by the leader, just guided and directed. There's two sides to this, and we have this kind of yin-yang concept to look at. The aspect of leadership which is yang-like, right? I claim, we will. That yang approach. Whereas the yin side of it is, aren't we all good doing this together? Have we achieved a great result? Isn't it great being together? That kind of sense of collectiveness. And you need both. And you need both pretty much in equal measure, probably. If you're, it depends on the situation, if you're a ship's captain, then most of the time, there's no emergency to deal with. And so your principal role is being social and building team spirit and so on. So it's rather yin-like. But when the emergency strikes, you have to claim a tyrant's authority or people would die. The captain of a ship is in that role. And we are all, to some extent, captains of our ship. It might be that we start with a boat. We're steering our own boat with a couple of passengers, but we're actually in charge of where it goes, and we're in charge of keeping it afloat. So we start small, but then it becomes a ship, then it becomes a flotilla, and maybe one day it actually becomes an armada, and we actually lead a group of people out of harm's way because we have developed that skill. We don't know what we're doing with this. We might unlock hidden reserves of leadership. And it is by no means certain that leaders have to have a certain aggressive attitude. Not at all. Leadership is much, much more subtle than that, of course. So, to summarize then, we're studying the first aspect of leadership, which is the word know in the 7-word system. And we're saying we have to give it scope, make a claim, and be authentic so that we can balance the yin and the yang of the exercise.